Hariom. So welcome to our lecture on the steps of Yoga Nidra and how you can design your own, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for your students. Look at the steps that are involved in writing your Yoga Nidra. So there's 8 different steps, and some of these steps are essential and some of these are optional. So looking at the first step, settling and internalization. Then we move to sankalpa or resolve, which is optional. Next is body rotation, then breath awareness, then opposites, also optional, visualizations, also optional, and sankalpa again, and finishing with externalization. So we're going to go through each of these steps and how we can put together our Yoga Nidra. So looking at stage 1, so settling and internalization. So this is the first step, and it's very much essential for all Yoga Nidra practices. Regardless of how long or short your Yoga Nidra is going to be, you definitely need to be including this. So you're going to start with body preparation. So this is where you're going to give instructions for Shavasana or another position. Now, Shavasana is the recommended position for Yoga Nidra because it is considered to be a relaxing one, but also one that is less chance that you're going to sleep, and also less parts of the body are touching each other. So Shavasana definitely is recommended, but for some people, Shavasana is not a comfortable position, even with the use of props. So that's where you might choose another position to do your Yoga Nidra in. It's important that you're going to give instructions for comfort and also making sure that the body is going to be aligned correctly, and then the mind will be able to start focusing. Now, next is the body release. So this is where the person is going to start to relax their body through awareness, like just noticing how the body is feeling. And many times, if we just become aware of our body, we notice that there's areas of tension and automatically we start to relax them. We can also use the breath. We can also use mantra, such as Om chanting. Now, looking at the body sensations. So we've got the awareness of the physical body and any sensory impressions. So you might be talking a little bit about how the body's feeling against the floor. You might be talking about any feelings that are there, like on the skin or the air touching the skin, or any kind of itching or tension that one might feel in the body. Next, you're going to move to the sounds in the environment. Now, it's really important that you slowly move away from the sounds around. You don't do it in a forceful way, because otherwise the mind is going to be really restless. It needs to give its little bit of attention to those sounds. So when we pay attention to those external sounds and we move from one sound to another, but keeping the attitude of a witness, so not being attached, just observing, the mind slowly starts to lose interest, and then it becomes nice and calm. And this is the same technique that we use for antamon, or inner silence, and it helps to prepare the consciousness to practice Yoga Nidra so that the mind can start going inward. Now, the next stage, or part of this stage, is the sound of the breath. So once we've become aware of those external sounds, we look to the sounds that are the closest, which is the breath. And this is something that the student may not have really been noticing before because of all the other sounds around. So starting to focus on the breath will help with the relaxation process and also bring focus. So you can see that this process of internalization is slowly moving the awareness from the physical body, which is the gross awareness, and slowly drawing the awareness inward to the sound of the breath in the body, which is the subtle. So this is the start of the process of pratyahara. Next, we're going to look at stage 2, which is the sankalpa, or the resolve. And the time of Yoga Nidra is when the subconscious mind is very receptive, and so it's perfect to use the resolve. Now, it isn't essential to have a sankalpa in your Yoga Nidra, but it has a huge amount of benefits, and it's a very powerful technique to reshape your personality and to bring more positive direction into life. So using that sankalpa is a way of training the mind, bringing discipline to the mind. So it's definitely recommended to use if possible. The type of sankalpa that you're going to use will vary depending on if it's a group class or an individual class. And it's a short mental statement which is impressed on the subconscious mind when it's receptive, sensitive, calm, and quiet. So you're giving that little bit of time for the sankalpa at the beginning, but also at the end. So it's like sowing the seed at the beginning of the Yoga Nidra, and at the end you're having that reminder of the sankalpa, which is the watering of the seed. So allowing that seed to flourish. So it's definitely recommended to be doing that if possible, and also depending on the length of your. Next, we're going to look at stage 3, which is the rotation of consciousness. So this is considered to be an essential stage, and it doesn't involve any movement. So now that they're in their position of shavasana or any other pose, they shouldn't be moving their body at all. It's not a practice of concentration. All one needs to be doing is being aware, listening to the voice that is guiding, and then moving their mind according to the instructions to different parts of the body. And that is also being done at a very consistent pace. So not suddenly fast and suddenly slow. So moving consistently. So for example, when the person conducting says right hand thumb, the student should repeat it mentally, thinking of the right hand thumb and moving on. They may not be able to visualize the different body parts. Of course they might, but it's not a necessity. And it's very helpful to follow the same sequence. So every time the student is doing the Yoga Nidra, it's going to be the same kind of sequence, so they know what's going to be coming. Mentally repeating the names of the different body parts in the same way that a child learns to repeat the letters of the alphabet. One doesn't have to remember what part comes next. The whole process is taking part in the subconscious mind. But the sequence should be automatic, and it should be thorough, and it should be very systematic. Okay, there is a very definite sequence for conducting the rotation of consciousness, and it begins with the right thumb and it ends with the little toe of the right foot. And then the circuit begins again with the left thumb to the little toe of the left foot, and then the back side, and then the front side. So it is done in this sequence because it directly relates to the motor homunculus, which is that symbolic man lying within the brain matter. And there's going to be more information about that in your lecture of the brain. Moving on to the next stage, which is stage 4, awareness of the breath. So this is also considered to be an essential stage. So after the rotation of consciousness, there is going to be more physical relaxation, which is going to continue by drawing that attention to the breath. Okay, so first maintaining awareness of the breath, not trying to force it, not trying to change it. Of course, once we become aware of the breath, we naturally start to deepen the breath, but it shouldn't be in a forceful manner. Okay. Then we may decide to watch the breath. So this can be observed in the nostrils, in the chest, in the navel or the belly, the movement of the belly, or it can be the passage between the navel and the throat, or even from the nostrils all the way down to the belly and back. So one can decide how much focus is going to be there for this stage. And also to increase the relaxation, you can simultaneously count the breaths mentally. So we see this a lot in Yoga Nidras, counting down from 27 to 1 or 54 to 1 or even 108 to 1. So this is just another way to increase the relaxation but also keep the focus. Now, awareness of the breath not only promotes relaxation and concentration, but it also awakens the higher energies and directs them to every cell of the body. So this can help to balance the energy in the body. It can help to energize the body, but in a relaxed way. And it will also increase the healing, which is why it's always recommended whenever one is going through any kind of illness that Yoga Nidra should be done as often as possible. Now, the next stage we're going to look at is stage 5, which is the opposites, or awareness of the sensations and feelings. So first is the relaxation on the plane of the feelings and emotions. It is an optional stage, optional but recommended. Okay, so feelings that are intensely physical or emotional are recalled or awakened and experienced fully and then removed. So they're often practiced with pairs of opposite feelings, most commonly. So heat and cold is a common one, heaviness and lightness, also pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, love and hate. So these pairings of feelings in Yoga Nidra are going to harmonize the opposite hemispheres of the brain, and they're going to help to balance our basic drives and control our functions that are normally unconscious. Now, this practice is going to be developing the willpower on the emotional plane and bringing relaxation by means of catharsis. So by reliving those memories, we can also let them go. Now, willpower is also learned because you're learning to consciously create a sensation or an experience, and the mind is becoming empowered to choose its own experiences and how one is going to react to them. And we know that this is a big part of yoga, is learning how to react to everything that comes up in our life. So Yoga Nidra is a very effective tool to help us with that. Now, the last note here on this slide is that this can bring up a range of emotions, wanted and unwanted. So you do need to be careful what kind of opposites you want to be including in your Yoga Nidra. Now we're going to continue a little bit more with the opposites. So by imagining certain feelings, the body can trigger various memory centers and bring up deep-rooted memories, experiences, and events from our subconscious and unconscious mind. So this is where certain things will come up for some people, and they might be comfortable with it, but they might not. So it's important for us to understand that, and the same goes for visualizations. It connects us with a very primitive part of the brain called the emotional brain, or the limbic system, which is a survival or instinctual part of the brain. So it's regulating the vital functions, temperature, thirst, appetite, metabolism, sex drive, pain and pleasure. So by identifying these different emotions and the sensations, we'll have these primitive or instinctual emotional reactions to how we feel. So for example, how we feel when we're hot or cold, it's going to bring up certain emotional feelings, but it's also going to make us feel a certain way physically. The ability to witness also increases as the habits of identification are broken, and this stage is like a bridge between the breath awareness and the visualization. When we're moving between these stages, pratyahara is deepened to a point where the mind is turned in on itself and it stays and rests in that awareness. So Yoga Nidra is developing control of the emotional reactions, but also the autonomic responses. And we can see this reflected in our daily life by an increase in perceptual awareness. So looking at how we perceive and interpret different events and different things that happen, emotional control, how we're reacting, and having a more focused and conscious direction in our life. Now the next stage, stage 6, is visualization. And it is again another optional stage, and it's going to induce more mental relaxation. Now the student is going to visualize images which are either named or described by the instructor. And these images are often having a universal significance and very powerful associations, and that brings this hidden deep contents of the unconscious mind into the conscious mind. So examples might include landscapes oceans, mountains, temples, saints, flowers, stories, as well as descriptions of powerful psychic symbols. So they might be the chakras or a lingam or the cross or the golden egg. There's lots of different options. And visualization develops self-awareness, and it relaxes the mind by purging it of disturbing or painful material. So it's a way of processing the things that are deep inside us. And it leads the mind to concentration or dharana. And in the advanced stages of a Yoga Nidra, the visualization develops into dhyan or pure meditation. Now, it's also important that the visualization finishes with an image that's going to be evoking feelings of peace and calmness. You don't want to finish with something that is creating, some difficult emotions inside. One needs to feel calm. So continuing looking at visualization, so it's going to unlock the stored up contents of the unconscious mind, which is normally only manifest during our dreams. And by stage 6, the pratyahara process is complete. Now the awareness can be focused on chittakash, which is that space of the mind. And within this space, the practitioner is able to view the contents of the mind. So we often think of it as in the space in front of the closed eyes. And then slowly things are released from the subconscious in the form of images. Now these images should be serving to activate the deeper layers of the mind through association. Now the images that you might choose to give may be unrelated, they might be linked by a theme, they may flow as a story, and they can be given in quick succession or they can be held for a short period of time. Now there's two different main categories of symbols. There's the conditioned symbols. So these are ones associated with our day-to-day social, cultural, religious, and moral experiences, and they might differ according to one's country, race, creed, and religion. Then there's the universal symbols, such as mantras, yantras, mandalas, and they're forming part of the consciousness of every man, woman, and child, regardless of their social, religious, and cultural traditions. So the symbols form the collective unconscious mind of mankind, and symbols of this type invoke very, very deep responses. Now, all images that you select you need to take care that the student is going to be ready for them, because sometimes you might choose an image that you think is harmless, but it can have a really strong impact on them. Like you might be talking about water, or you might be talking about a well, but then they might have fallen in a well and almost drowned, or maybe a family member did. So that is going to create a lot of strong emotions related to it. So you do need to be careful, and sometimes we don't know either. So until the mind has become focused and one-pointed, it may be difficult to visualize, because when the mind is dissipated, you can't hold the attention long enough to form an image. So visualization can take a bit of time to develop, and it is helpful if you start visualizing familiar objects, daily routines, events that have left a strong impression. So it's much easier to visualize them than something that's not in your regular life. So next we're going to look at stage 7. So again, this is the sankalpa or resolve. We know that this is optional but strongly recommended, and definitely if you've included the sankalpa in stage 2, it's very necessary that you're again remembering the sankalpa in stage 7. So as I was saying, you've planted the seed in stage 2, and in stage 7 you're watering the seed. So the sankalpa is remembered as the unconscious mind is really receptive to positive thoughts and suggestions. And this direct order from the conscious mind to the unconscious is the seed enabling one to radically change one's attitude, behavior, and destiny. Now the resolve should be stated clearly and positively, and in the exact same wording as it was at the beginning of the Yoga Nidra. Sometimes you may even visualize that you're writing that resolve on a piece of paper or on a blackboard. So it just makes it that little bit clearer to understand. and it's going to be building mental strength and positivity. And also faith has a big impact on one's resolve, and it strengthens the effect. So it is really important that that sankalpa is very comfortable within one's mind. And that's where one should also work on finding the right sankalpa. And we've got a lecture of that as well. So moving to the last stage, which is stage 8, externalization. So this is another essential stage, as the Yoga Nidra practice is concluded by gradually bringing the mind from the condition of psychic sleep to the waking state. So you generally need at least 5 minutes for that slow externalization, and one is progressively moving from that subtle internal awareness to the gross external awareness. If externalization occurs really fast, then one might feel a little bit disorientated. So it's really important to take the time to move through this. So you can start with awareness of the breath. So often I may say moving back to the breath, notice how the breath is feeling, or how the breath is moving, or noticing the sound of the breath. Then becoming aware of the body. So the parts of the body, the contact with the floor, any kind of sensations that one can feel in the body. Then becoming aware of the body in relation to the room. So the location of the body, whether one's on the mat or on the bed or somewhere else, the description of the room in relation to the body. And then moving to the external environment. So having that awareness of the room and the building, what time of day it is, the sounds that are around. So bringing one back to the external. And then closing their practice. So having awareness of the body and starting to move the body slowly. Now you'll see the last one here, chanting of Om can be a gentle way to slowly bring one back. And we do this a lot in Yoga Nidra. Sometimes people may be asleep, but when they hear the chanting of Om, they move away from that sleep and they start the process of externalization. So you may choose to do that as well. So now looking at the flow of Yoga Nidra. Okay, so there is that flow from the awareness of the external environment, then to the awareness of the physical body, awareness of the breath, and then into the various layers of the mind. So you can also see them as moving from the gross to the subtle, as the body is gross, so it's tangible, easy to perceive and experience, and then the mind is subtle, so it's elusive, it's hard to perceive and experience. And then on completion, the awareness is brought back from the various layers of the mind to the breath, to the physical body, and then to the environment. So again, moving from subtle to gross. So now looking at making your own Yoga Nidra. So the first stage is internalization. So you're going to look at preparing the body. So giving clear instructions for your position, using supports as needed. Now we know that Shavasana is the classic position, and it is recommended because less parts of the body are touching, especially the fingertips. But Shavasana is not always a comfortable position, even with bolsters. So you may choose another position if you choose to, but what is most essential is comfort. Okay, they should always be comfortable and they should feel supported and the eyes should be closed. Now is body release. So one doesn't need to deliberately relax the muscles, but a feeling of relaxation can be invoked, like before you go to sleep. So there's many techniques that can be used here. One can take a few deep, full breaths. One can sigh out tension. One can chant Om, or the instructor can chant and the student can repeat it mentally. Sometimes it can be nice to take a deep breath in and then breathing out slowly through the mouth could be a nice way to release. Sometimes, for some people, if they are feeling a lot of restlessness, you may actually get everyone to tighten their whole body and then release it. So you can decide what techniques you want to employ there. Now, The next note is about how Guruji likes to start his Yoga Nidra practice sitting up, chanting Om, and then laying down in Shavasana. So that's also a nice option to choose. Next, you're going to look at body sensations, so awareness of the physical body, noticing anything like itching or restlessness, if there's any tension in the body, if there's certain feelings, like you can feel the air against the skin or the body against the floor. So just going through that. Then looking at the outside sounds, and this will depend on the environment, but starting by noticing the bigger sounds to begin with, and then choosing the ones that are closer, eventually moving to the closest one, which is one's own breath. Now, at this stage, you can also talk about the process of Yoga Nidra, that one should listen and follow the instructions given, and also that one should avoid sleeping. Next, we'll look at phrasing of the Sankalpa. So either in the present or the future tense. And it should resonate for you, and it should be inspiring. Okay? It should be positive, because if it's not, the mind is going to rebel. Like if you tell the mind not to do something, it acts like that naughty child and it does the opposite. And then one starts to feel guilt or some weakness. So it's really important that the Sankalpa is chosen carefully and that time is given for it to unfold. Okay? And when one starts to practice a Yoga Nidra with that specific Sankalpa, it shouldn't be changed. Because every time you practice it, it's going to get more powerful. Now, the wording should also be very precise and clear, otherwise it's not going to penetrate the subconscious mind. Next, looking at rotation. So the rotation of consciousness, stick to the same order each time so it becomes natural and easier for the mind to follow, and it also gives faster relaxation. So more or less time can be given to each part, but you're generally moving between body parts fairly rapidly. If you have less time, then you still move in the same direction, the same order, but you're giving less detail. So for example, if you don't have a lot of time, you might just talk about the whole hand, the wrist, the forearm, the elbow, the arm, the upper arm. But if you have more, then you can talk about, okay, the right thumb fingernail, and in a lot more detail. So just keep with the same sequence, but give more or less detail according to what is possible for you. And when you're designing a Yoga Nidra, especially for therapeutic purposes, you might be giving more details about certain parts of the body. So for example, if you're doing a Yoga Nidra for digestion, you may talk about the different parts of the digestive system. Now, for some people, they might not know what all those parts are or where those parts are, but they will just mentally be repeating it. Next, building awareness of the breath. So though we are just becoming aware of the breath and we're not trying to change the breath or force it in any way, naturally you may start to deepen and slow the breath just from becoming aware of the breath. Now also, there's lots of areas to focus on, so one can focus on the nostrils, in the chest, on the navel, or in the passage between the navel and the throat, or you might have a combination. You can incorporate counts, so it might be from 27 to 1, 54 to 1, or 108 to 1. And you might also remind them that they don't have to get to 1. And if they miss one, then they go back. So for example, if they were going from 27 to 1 and they missed it, then they can go back to 27 and continue. Okay, and some people like to say inhaling 27, exhaling 27. So there's different ways that you can word it. Then Soham is often used at this time of the breath. So inhaling So, exhaling Hum. Om can also be used, so especially with the exhalation, but it can be used in that. One can also have awareness of the eyebrow center. So as if you're inhaling to the eyebrow center, exhaling from the eyebrow center. And also the psychic alternate nostril breathing. So the inhaling with the left, exhaling right, but not using the hands. So it's all mental. So those are just different aspects that you can use in this stage as per your convenience and what time you have available. Now looking at the opposites. So the opposites will depend, the types you use will depend on the student and what they're ready for. Because as we've already mentioned, some of them can be quite triggering. Okay, so if you don't know the student very well, it's better to use just simple examples. So for example, hot and cold, or if you find those too extreme, you could use warm and cool. Heavy and light, also very common. Then we've got others that are very common but can be triggering. So pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, love and hate. Then there's some other examples that you might prefer to include or add. So these are different physical sensations or feelings. For example, awake or sleepy, calm or anxious, centered or spacey, floating or sinking, comfortable or uncomfortable, deep or superficial, dry or moist, dull or sharp, spacious or constricted, strong or weak, relaxed or tense, sensitive or numb, spacious or claustrophobic. So when you're designing a yoga nidra specifically for a person, you may have discussed some of the different some of these different opposites, and you might discuss what is going to be suitable for them and what might trigger a stronger reaction. So examples of emotional opposites. So you've got aggressive or passive, approving or disapproving, assured or perplexed, boisterous or mellow, calm or agitated, composed or worried, confident or insecure, cooperative or competitive, delighted and disgust, domineering and meek, empathetic or indifferent, fearless or frightened, flexible or fixated, generous or resentful, grateful or ungrateful, happy or sad, helpful or uncooperative, innocent or guilty, interested or bored, peaceful or enraged, powerful or helpless, proud or ashamed, responsive or apathetic, safe or abandoned or threatened, satisfied or frustrated, secure or apprehensive, sensitive or numb, tender or violent, tolerant or contemptuous, trusting or suspicious, unafraid or anxious, unreserved or shy, vital or exhausted. There's a lot of examples there. And if you're working with a person one-on-one, then you may like to implement the practice of the swan. So the swan practice to look at what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what do they need to work on, and you can put some of this into their yoga nidra. What kind of visualizations? So there are the conditioned or universal symbols. Then one may also focus on that inner space, so the chittakash, looking at colors, patterns. The oceanal well are also common, and then also the spontaneous thoughts that might come up. You might have a more like a form of a story of a visualization. So instead of just images, it's a flow. So that might involve mountains or a park or a forest or a temple, the floating body, the ocean and well again as part of a story, not just an image, the eyebrow center, the golden egg. There's lots of different things that you can incorporate into a story. Then psychic center visualization, so you could focus on each chakra, visualizing the chakras, the area of the chakras, and also what the chakra is representing, so the color, the yantra, and more details. Then, of course, there's the rapid image visualization. So there's lots of different things that can be put there. Here I've just put the example, red rose, waves breaking, sun rising. And you can have a look into Swami Satyananda's book of Yoga Nidra and other Yoga Nidras, and you'll get an idea of lots of different images that you can include as part of this. It might be the movement in time, so looking at the events of the day, or even the events of something big that has happened that one is healing from. Then there's other things like practicing of asanas, or looking at aura, or healing of energy. Looking at qualities like kindness and love and compassion, healing, authenticity, creativity, peace, being present, being mindful, welcoming, embracing. All of those things are nice to include as well. And the last point, as we've mentioned, don't forget that some images can trigger intense responses. Okay, even looking at something that you might think is okay, like maybe going for a walk in the forest, and other people will say, oh, but what's in the forest? Maybe there's, you know, some animals in there or some insects that I don't like, or maybe I'm going to lose my way, you know, all based on their past experiences. Certain fears can start to come up. So next, looking at putting it all together. So you're going to decide on why you want to make a Yoga Nidra. And is it going to be a general Yoga Nidra? So is it going to be for the whole class, or is it very specific? You know, like, is it specific to that one person, or is it specific to a certain disease or a certain condition? Next, remembering that not all of the steps are essential. So it depends on the length of the Yoga Nidra that you want to have, and you can adapt it accordingly. Okay, so you can shorten some stages, you can lengthen some as per your need and what the purpose of the Yoga Nidra is for. And then don't forget to factor in suitability regarding the choice of visualization. Like sometimes you'll see Yoga Nidras which talk about death. Now that can be a very difficult triggering visualization to have. So that's not something that you'd want to incorporate into a Yoga Nidra that you've given to your new students. Okay, that's going to be definitely an advanced practice. And then trying to keep the movement of the rotation of consciousness quite rapid. And also during certain visualizations, you need to keep that rapid movement as well. So moving from one visualization to the next. The other thing is that too much of a gap between speaking is going to induce sleep. So especially this can happen with awareness of the breath. If you've given them time to count, say from 27 to 1, and you're giving too long a gap, then they're going to fall asleep. So you don't want to have too much. And then the sankalpa and visualization can make all the difference. So I would always recommend that you put them there if it's possible, because then you're going to have a much deeper effect. So have fun making your own Yoga Nidras. Hari Om.